Hey, welcome to another awkwardly awesome podcast fan favorite. Ti- Tiffany Brooke Fest. Tiffany Brooke Fest grew up in a house where there was abuse and financial hardship. Her life could have gone in any number of really painful directions. She chose a path and acquired the tools to to become very successful and to also be of tremendous service to others. And now she talks about the power of becoming the challenge, becoming the challenge. And we are all going to go through great challenges in this life. Tiffany's words and message are powerful. I urge you to listen to this interview with her.
Today's guest, Tiffani Brooke Fest.
Hey, Tiffany, welcome.
Hi, Jason. That was such a beautiful introduction of me. Thank you so much.
First of all, what is it like hearing the whole panorama of your story?
I think that all of us as human beings tend to cower from our own accomplishments or greatness in any way. And that, in fact, we all have greatness in us. And so it's so beautiful when someone honors that in you, because it's so hard for us to see in ourselves. And so that's what I was feeling, was just honored to be seen by someone in a way that you often have to remind yourself that you are worthy, that you have accomplished, that you've done great things with your life. So I just felt really honored and really happy to hear it.
Well, I'm already getting goosebumps with your first answer.
Oh. Isn't there? I think there's a phrase, I'm going to butcher it, but right, it's that we don't fear our own weakness, we fear our own greatness the most, something like that. And I think that's true.
It is. I think that might be part of a Marion Williamson quote.
Yeah. I was like, who said that? Yeah.
Which I just love that quote so much. So I've been curious to ask you this since I started, since I met you and started learning more about your story. But so things were going along on one path. Then at age eight, for some reason, you joined the community theater. What was your reason for joining?
You know, I think now that I'm thinking of that, I'd never thought about it because I was young. I think subconsciously, even young, when you've gone through abuse at home and sort of an unsafe environment, you are looking, even at 8, you may not know it with those words, you are looking for sanctuary. And another thing that had happened is I was not great at sports. You know, as a lot of us as artists can relate to, right? It's like, all the kids were playing basketball or baseball or whatever. And you were like, my mom actually would say you would be in left field in softball singing to the dandelions with zero interest in what was going on in the game.
Singing to the dandelions.
Yes, I would be picking dandelions and singing. She said you were always just, not in. And so finding, I guess, to say theater was just a way to see, well, maybe this is where I'm going to have this home or sanctuary. And it was just immediately profound and true in ways that became more evident as I got older. But even then, I think at 8, there was something to this storytelling that allowed me to, yes, in some ways forget my troubles at home, but I think in a deeper way to, again, go into what we're going to talk about later, to use them. I could cry. I could be these crazy characters who could yell and say the things I wasn't able to say at home. I was so in touch with my emotions because they were so resonant and right there because of things that had happened to me, that I immediately knew this alchemy, this magic of like, I have tools here I can use that other kids who don't have this trauma or experience at home don't also then get to reap the benefits of this art being so resonant in me, like already a piece of me, because in a way that trauma was giving me the fuel to do the art and tell the stories and have compassion for other human beings and play those characters.
So acting immediately interests you in a way that sports just did not.
Yeah, 100%.
Can you say any more about why you think acting interests you?
You know, not to jump ahead, but I think, you know, because you know my story, I think it's more as I got older too. Like I knew I loved theater and that was happening inside me. But by the time I got to high school, it was that real realization that I was transforming my pain into storytelling, and that I was good at it because of my pain. And so that little inkling of like your suffering becoming a source of purpose was already kind of resonant. And yeah, it felt sacred. It's mystic to me when you can alchemize something that was so hard in your own life, but through art, it feels triumphant, right? That I get to play these characters. And now this thing that I thought was so dark and hard and awful, I'm winning, you know. I won my first Best Actress award, you know, as silly as it is, right? In a San Antonio high school play, but we went on to compete like on a regional level. And I'll never forget winning Best Actress for playing an 80-year-old senile old woman in the play. And I connected to her so deeply at, 16 years old. And I think my history and my, in a way, suffering allowed me to do that. And so I'm like thankful for it in this bizarre way. And that takes time to realize, right? I was not at all trying to say that I'm grateful for these awful things that happened at home. But eventually through my life, I see the benefits of it and how it has made me a better artist and a better human being. Like I connect to other people and their suffering because I've had my own. Yeah.
So in 8 short years from 8 years old to age 16,
yeah,
you went from just learning about acting to competing and winning awards. What's that journey like in terms of from a perspective of learning a craft very quickly?
Yeah. I mean, acting just became this, probably like someone would feel about a sport, right? Or finding that they're good in basketball. You want to learn it and get better. And I felt like I found this thing that I excelled at naturally. And, by high school, I then auditioned. I was from San Antonio, Texas, and there were no, magnet schools at that time for acting in high school. But my senior year of high school, one happened, and it was called the Northeast School of the Arts, NISA. And I auditioned for it so that I could at least get in for my senior year because there had never been this kind of school in San Antonio. And so I got in, I got accepted. And I got to spend my senior year experiencing training as an actor on a whole new level. Like, this school was for actors. So suddenly I'm, really learning Meisner. I'm really learning Stanislavski. I'm really learning the difference, right, between method acting and Meisner, or Stella Adler technique versus Meisner, and just loving it. I just remember by that time, even before getting into NISA, I think by 15, 16, when I started really doing it at that level, I knew that it was what I was going to do with my life. And I had told my mother, I'm going to move to New York City to become an actress. So.
Does acting take much practice? I mean, as a viewer, like we see the movie and it's like an hour or 2 hour, 40 minutes, 2 hours long, and it's easy to assume that that's what acting is, but
I think that's a great question, because I think other actors would agree with me here. I get frustrated when I feel like people think that somehow acting's easier than painting, right? And I would tell people, like, if I said tomorrow, I'm just going to be a painter, I'm going to get a headshot, and I could do this. Like, you hear that from people with acting, and I try to be kind about it, but I say that would be like me saying, who's never painted, I bought the paint, I'm going to make a great painting tomorrow. And I'm like, really? I think that's the thing, right? Because we're so, I think with movies and cinema or TV shows, it's so in our everyday culture that it's easier to think that it's easy because we're watching the content every day. But the second someone hands you, I've done this with friends who aren't actors. I'm like, here's what the sides look like for that scene you just watched that you think, would be so easy. And none of the nuance that actor brought to that role is on the page. It's just lines. That subtext that you're seeing, right? That actor generally created, it's deeply harder than you would think. The subtleties of it, and how what's on the page in the story, but how do you then create that? When I'm holding this coffee mug, you're making some of it up. Like, I'm holding this coffee mug and talking to my mom in this scene, let's say. What if I decide that coffee mug is the one I painted for her when I was 7 years old, and she never liked it, and it's cracked, and she never liked what I painted on it? So now when she's yelling at me, the coffee cup is also triggering me. Like, there's a relationship to the objects in the room. And because when we talk in real life, right, that happens. You'll think of something from your past with your mother when she says something in the present, or you're wearing the sweatshirt that the ex-boyfriend gave you while you're fighting with your new fiance. That's the complexity of life. And so you have to, storytelling's so beautiful because you are creating those pieces that aren't in the script that actually make that character true. Yeah.
The pieces that aren't in the script that actually make that character true.
Yes. And I think that's the part in when you watch a film that's on the page. But if I handed you a script, you'd see, sure, like, the story's there. Like, if the story is that your mother dies and you've gone back home to care for her, but it's not going to say all the things that happened between you and her that have created the dynamic that you come home to. So you have to fill in the lines, paint in between the lines, those things. And that's why the other thing I love is every actor would play that differently. Even though the story's the same, a different actor would bring a totally different subtext and backstory, and therefore way of being with that mother in the scene than anybody else.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So as a senior in high school, how many hours a day kind of were you practicing acting? Like half an hour a day?
I think more. I think I was lucky because senior year I got to switch to this art, school. So while of course I still had to take the everyday courses, you have to take your algebra and all these things, there was built-in time for us to commit more to acting. So I would say by senior year of high school, because we were also doing like 4 plays a year.
Wow, that's rigorous.
It was rigorous. And I wanted to figure out, what kind of plays were speaking to me and what I wanted to do. So you could also do black box plays, which were in the smaller theater where, it's more intimate. You're usually going to do like, you have to do in a black box a script that's got less characters and maybe just has one living room, right? Where like it all kind of takes place in one setting, and sort of discovered that was my favorite thing. And I think because that intimacy, right, of like the story being small and then the audience being so close. So it really felt like you're creating that dynamic relationship with yourself and the people watching the story in the black box. But so I was probably doing, with school, probably at least 3 hours a day. And then you're going to come home and memorize your lines. And then you're going to have your rehearsals after school. So, and I loved it. So you'd be rehearsing, nights as well from, let's say 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. And it was just wonderful. So I would say I was highly immersed in it at that time. Like you would if you were prepping for, the basketball championships,
So maybe 8 or 9 hours a day, you were doing something involving acting.
If we were doing a play, yep, for sure.
I wanted to emphasize that because to me that's important to realize how much time happens behind the scenes to become excellent.
I think so.
Yeah. What?
I said, I think so. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. It takes time and effort, just like anything else that you love and want to be good at. Yeah.
And then you weren't just acting in high school. You got these amazing, great grades and got a scholarship to an amazing school. Will you talk just a little bit about
sure.
that?
Yeah, I think, because I came from a bit of a broken home, I haven't said it yet on this podcast, but it's in my talk. So I'll just say now, I was sexually abused by my grandfather for years of my childhood. And then there was just abuse at home that was physical, as well as a lot of just emotional. There was a lot of yelling in my home. There was physical violence in my home. So I knew as well, because there was also like fluctuating amounts of money, and my parents got a divorce when I was 12. And then my mom was a single mother. And I knew if I wanted to get to university and get to New York, which was the dream, that would have to come from me. That wasn't going to be money from home. And so I knew I'm going to have to get a scholarship to get there. And I graduated high school 3rd in my class. I wanted to be valedictorian. So I remember being mad that I was 3rd and not 1st. But either way, I got to stand up on the stage as the top 3 students. And that was enough to get me, when I started applying to universities in New York, I knew I couldn't just get into one that accepted me as an actor. I also needed the funds. And so I will be forever grateful that Fordham University at Lincoln Center, which ended up the perfect home for me, not only accepted me, but I remember getting on the call with them and having to say, like, I'm not going to have money to go here. And they said, no, you're getting a financial scholarship. You have amazing grades, of course. And it was just, yeah, the most beautiful, because I was speaking to the woman who was, top in the theater division, and she was telling me I was accepted, but my brain was like, well, I won't be able to go. And she said, oh no, your grades were amazing. And I remember just being so happy, thinking, oh, I can actually go. And that year at Fordham, it's since become a bigger program. I've stayed really good friends with one of my favorite acting professors from there, Matthew McGuire. I'll send him this podcast so he can hear me give him praise, because to be friends with him, 24 years later is such a gift. It just was a magical home for me, and I'm so grateful that they thought I was worthy of going. But that year, because the program was much smaller then, they only accepted 7 actors. So I was very, very lucky.
So they accepted 7 actors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember just thinking, whoa, I get to go to New York. It's being funded, it's being paid for, and I am one of 7, and it was where Denzel Washington went. And I remember being so excited, like I was going to go where Denzel went. And he came and spoke, at my first year there, and I was just like, so excited.
So talk about jumping a huge hurdle from 8 to winning, and from 8 starting acting, winning the award at 16, to getting into Fordham. And these are all huge hurdles, but then you encounter another hurdle after school. Like, it's one thing to go to school for acting, but then another thing to get selected for roles. What was that like?
Yeah, that to this day is hard. If we're being honest about that part of being an actor, is the hardest part. It's that there's no guarantee you're going to work. It's very difficult. I remember my first close call, as I like to call it, out of college, right? Is because then you're equipped with the tools. You've gone through 4 years at this incredible university. You've become a better actor, but now you're auditioning out in the world. And my first close call was like right out of university. I had a manager, and I got an audition for Spike Lee's new movie at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was called She Hate Me. It's actually not one of his most successful movies, but didn't matter. I would have loved to be in a Spike Lee film. And I was so nervous, but like excited. And he still works with the same casting director today as he did then, Kim Coleman, who I'll never forget, because I still am trying. I want to audition for her again. I still haven't. I did one audition for her a couple years ago, but it was a self-tape. And I'm so hoping to get in a room with her to thank her for when I was right out of university and had this big audition and was so nervous, and she was so lovely in the room. And I left after the first audition thinking, okay, I don't know. And then you get
so what about how she acted made her so lovely in the room?
Well, because that would be a whole convo too, is that casting rooms are not always nice. Like, they can feel like they literally, sometimes, it's not an exaggeration, you're in a room with 25, 30 other women who kind of look like you, if that's the deal, right, of what they're casting. So you're like, oh God, you're trying not to look at everyone or compare yourself, and you're holding your sides, which just means like the 2 or 3 pages that they've given you to prepare. And your like hands are shaking, and you're looking at the other girls like, are they better than me? And then often literally a casting director opens the door and says, next. Like, it's not a loving environment to come in. And so often they just say next, and then they say, come stand on this line, which is where your marker is to stand so they can tape your audition. And it can feel really inhospitable,
And then you have all this anticipation and all these nerves.
Yes. And so I think what made Kim special, and not to dog on casting directors, because there are some really lovely people in the room too, but often it's not. It feels kind of like a next, we don't really care. And Kim was just, hi, Tiffani, I'm Kim. Stand here. We're going to take our time. I got to do it several times, which is a big deal. Like, sometimes your first read when you're especially younger and whatever is like, you're nervous. So it's not your best. And a good casting director will make you feel comfortable and say, hey, let's try that again. Or even say, hey, let's try that again. And how about you try this, right? And they'll give you like little notes so that you have something to show them, right? How about we do it this way where you're really angry at so-and-so. And she just had that kind of nurturing energy in the room. So I walked out feeling, pretty good, but you're kind of like, who knows? There were all these other girls there. And then you get a callback. And a callback is when, okay, they've narrowed it down from those 25, 30 girls in the room. Usually, let's say they've narrowed it down to maybe 10. And so I get a callback and I'm like, okay. So I get
a Spike Lee movie, you get a callback.
I was like really excited. And then I go in for the callback. Again, it went well. It's Kim there. I leave. And then the crazy part is sometimes then there's a third callback. Sometimes that's called a chemistry read if they're going to pair you with someone else. Sometimes it's just a third round, right? Because they've narrowed it again. But this is where the story gets amazing, and I'll never forget, is I walk in, and Kim at that point, she kind of knows. She's like, hi, Tiffani, come on back in. But then doesn't tell me. She opens the door and she's like, Tiffani, Spike, Tiffani. Spike Lee is sitting at the camera for this read because that's how close I am to getting the role. And I was like, wait, did Kim just introduce me? Like, no big deal. Tiffani, Spike, Tiffani. And I think I literally went, hi, yes, hi, Spike. Like, so nervous. And he was so lovely too. I have to tell you, he looked me right in the eyes. Hi, Tiffani. It's really wonderful to have you here. Let's go. He was just like, let's go. We're ready. And we do the scene. He reads it with me, which is also crazy. I got to do the scene with Spike so he could like watch and, he's doing this and he's at the camera. And I'm like, as far as I'm concerned at that point, I've already won. I've been directed by Spike Lee. I'm being directed by Spike Lee at his camera. Okay. And so here's the hard part of acting though, right? I leave. I'm so excited that I met Spike Lee and I don't get it. And that's acting in a nutshell, right? More times than not, you are not going to get it. So how do you keep going? And how do you keep investing in yourself? And how do you not give up? That's what acting really is. And so in some ways it fits perfectly in my life story, right? Because my life has been always about resilience in every way, even in the career path that I chose, which is, it's just interesting, to me, like, oh, I even chose a path, right? Where like, I have to build that inner resolve and that resilience. But that has served me so well because that is also how I've been able to overcome the trauma and pain of my life, is building that resilience.
We could just talk for a few hours about all the movies you've been in and about your musical career, which you didn't even mention when we met, and about all that. And there's also this other part of you, just, I mean, it all ties to get together, but there's your life led you to a place of saying, I don't believe in overcoming our greatest challenges. I believe in becoming one with them. I don't believe in overcoming our greatest challenges. I believe in becoming one with them. So, which is profound. To get to the point where I had success-wise,
Right.
you had to jump through many hurdles, and a lot of people who aspire to acting aspire to go to a great college. They don't get that. And so that's one level, and a level worthy of great celebration. And but then could you begin talking about this whole other level of your life? Maybe a good segue to that is how did Buddhism come into your life?
Yeah, I think there's a way I'll try to say both that ties it into the acting. Because sort of, if we had kept going about acting, which as you said would be a whole other podcast, there's so many tangents we could go on. But let's just jump to, I essentially started booking horror films. That became sort of where I got a little, what I call mild success. I'm still grateful, right? But, these are smaller budget films, but I was so happy to be working. And when I booked my breakout role, as you mentioned in my intro, in 2014, I booked a pretty small role in a horror film called Circus of the Dead. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, yay, I get to go work and be on set, which was wonderful. But when it premiered at this big horror festival, the biggest one in the US, I woke up the next day to 5,000 fans on my Facebook page sending me messages. And I was like, oh, wow. And so from that, just to kind of bring us to your question, that catapulted me to more horror films. What's beautiful about that community is people who love horror films make horror films. So it's a bunch of movie nerds making movies they love. And once they see you in one, they want to work with you because they're a part of this horror scene in this community. So it was really wonderful and beautiful. And I had such an extraordinary time. It was about a decade of doing more horror films after that and just learning and growing. Being on set makes you a better actor. It was wonderful. However, what started happening for me, a couple things simultaneously. One, as it relates to acting, was as happy as I was acting, there was still this piece of me from the abuse and things that had gone on in my life. Acting always allowed me to transform and transmute that. But I guess the easiest way to say it was I was like, okay, but what else? Like the acting wasn't, I didn't feel complete by just having that. And so what started happening on the sidelines that I wasn't talking about, right, outside of my personal life, was I was having panic attacks. I was having symptoms come up that are a result, right, of having PTSD and these things in my life. And I had done years of therapy, and I'm so grateful and done some of that work. But I was having a lot of panic attacks and things going on where a friend of mine introduced me to Buddhism, would be the short way to get there. And I went to a meeting, and I will say to this day, it was so mystic to me because I was sort of not wanting to go, and
so what made you say yes to going to this meeting if you didn't really want to go?
No, I wish I had a great answer to that. I think a deeper knowing in myself. I
kind
believe
of the same way you originally got into acting when you were 8.
that's right. I think, which will relate to Buddhism as we talk about it, I think your soul knows where you're meant to be. And so that there was something deeper in my soul that said, just go. And I went, And, I now believe I was a Buddhist in other lives. Like, this is how that works. And so when I arrived and they were chanting in this room together in someone's home, they were chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which many people know from Tina Turner. She made it quite big, which is wonderful. And her film, about Tina Turner, that film, which was so good, What's Love Got to Do with It, shows that part of her life. So I sort of knew about, I say that to say it was even in kind of my acting peripheral, right? I knew that movie. I knew her story, which is not that far off from mine, right? Of suffering and then transforming and being this artist. And Buddhism changed her life and is how she left Ike Turner.
So you saw this movie about Tina Turner before you got into Buddhism?
Yeah, I had seen it years prior. And also, I would say this, in college and university, because Fordham University is a Jesuit university, you had to take two religion courses. And I had taken Buddhism in college and really profoundly loved it. I loved that there was no God in Buddhism. It was more of a philosophy. The God is in yourself, and that you create your life through your thoughts, words, and deeds, that your highest self is your God. I found that so beautiful. So I think all those things are why that deeper part of me said, okay, go to the meeting. And when I went, the first thing I remember is as they were chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo in the room, my soul told me I knew that already. Like, I had said that chant before. I just felt I know this already. And then I'll never forget. So when you do start chanting, because they tell you just try it. And I was having such bad panic attacks, I'll be honest here, that I would punch my own self in the face. I would have a black eye. Yeah, it was really bad. So I think I was desperate in a way too, right? Like, maybe this will help. And it took a few years, like I would say 3 years in my practice. But by the end of year 3 of chanting, I was off all medication and no longer having panic attacks. And
so Buddhism wasn't an instant fix for your panic attacks.
Helping, right? But it was slowly helping for sure. But yeah, it's not instant. It was just another piece I was putting into my life, right, as a practice and a tool. But
and within 3 years' time, which is long when you're suffering, but relatively short.
Yes.
Within a life, you were noticing significant differences.
Yes. And I would say too, back to sort of the mystic thing of it and feeling I was already a Buddhist before, there's another thing we chant. The Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is kind of easier to pick up, but then we chant a portion of the Lotus Sutra, which is in Sanskrit, and it's kind of long. And I picked it up so quickly because I knew it already. It was like learning a song you used to know. It was incredible to me. So I just knew that's what kept me going, though. I knew, like, I've already done this. So I'm supposed to be doing it. And so I was kind of still doing horror films, etc., transforming this like panic attacks and suffering from my childhood. And then out of Buddhism came, as you know, Jason, this call to what I would say is service, but also because we would say in our practice all the time that, and I found this so helpful for me because I'd never heard religion say this, which was that suffering is enlightenment. I feel like so much of religion, especially Judeo-Christian religion, is that some God outside of yourself is who you pray to take away this pain or whatever you're going through. And Buddhism was like, your suffering is where your enlightenment lies. Oh, and by the way, Tiffani, I would go to meetings crying and saying, this happened to me as a kid and I can't get rid of it. And it's making me sick. And I've had these panic attacks. And they would turn to me and say, congratulations. That means your mission is so big. I had just never heard anyone tell me something like this about my suffering, you know? And at first I hated it. I would go, these people are nuts. Why are they saying that to me? But, you know, as you know, Jason, from then my TED Talk that comes later, is that is what changed my life, is understanding that, in fact, the more I chanted and the more I resolved to see my suffering as my own enlightenment, to see that the greater your suffering, the greater your mission, which is a Buddhist principle, that the wound is where the light enters us, which is the way Rumi says it, is I just kept determining to transform it. I didn't know what that would look like, but what came out of it was this, oh, wow, this aha moment of my abuse and suffering as a woman and a girl, especially the sexual abuse, which was my greatest suffering of my life, allows me to more effectively help and support other women survivors around the world. It is my gift. It is my superpower. If I can harness that pain to help another person, it's not to say that I should have, that it's awful that it happened, but then it's worthy of the experience of my life if I can transform it and help other people. And that's the calling that started coming up for me, that then turned me towards activism, because I knew I was a storyteller. I knew I was an actress. I knew that my pain had made me a better vessel to tell human stories because I knew what suffering was. But Buddhism added this layer of, okay, but how are you going to help other people with that? And that's where happiness lied for me. Is happiness is never just your own, you know, I was getting a little bit of success or getting the acting roles, but I do believe, and through my Buddhist practice, that happiness exists in service to others. It's when you take that thing and you support the world around you. That's when you feel the most happy. And so I became really attuned to, I want to be of service to other girls who have suffered sexual violence around the world. I didn't know how I was going to do that. I didn't have money to do that. But my practice started telling me that's what's next. Yeah, be an actress, tell stories, and how can you take that thing that hurt you the most and go help other women?
Well, there's first of all, you were saying a little bit about this before we got on. People can heal suffering, can be our greatest gift, and go, I don't like pain. I don't want to inflict suffering on myself. I don't want to promote pain.
Right.
And Buddhism isn't talking about inflicting pain or promoting pain at all.
No.
Right?
That's right. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's the journey and the evolution, right, of saying something like that, is that we're not at all trying to say, get out there and suffer.
Get out there and suffer.
Go suffer, because then you'll find the source of your gift of service to others. But I would say this, and Buddhism says it pretty profoundly, suffering is a part of life. It's inescapable. Not one person is going to exit this life having not suffered. Now, granted, there's levels of suffering, right? Like I get that. I don't want to say, you know, that means we should have the most profound suffering there is. I wish that didn't exist. But whatever your suffering is, Buddhism would say the best way to transform that, which goes back to how you introduced me and how I started phrasing it, is we tend to, as a culture, especially a Western one, it's not as common in Eastern, which is where I loved India so much. But in Western culture, we overcome our obstacles. Then we turn away from them. I've beat that thing. I don't want to talk about it. It's a blemish on my life.
It's in the past.
Yeah, it's in the past. It actually, I'm so good now because I've overcome it. And I just started realizing that's in some ways what I had been doing. It didn't solve it though. It was still in there and coming up as panic attacks or these kind of residual suffering. And for me, what really transformed it was saying, wow, I can now be of service to other women who have suffered this way because of my unique suffering. Not because it's wonderful or I wanted it, or I'm so glad it happened. But it gave me, it also empowered me around my suffering in a way nothing ever had, right? Like I could go to therapy and work on it and work on loving myself and the pain that had been inflicted on me. But I felt the most empowered when I could say, now I can actually go be of service because of it. And I want that for people in the way that they've suffered. And I think it's no different than when you talk to, for example, right? Here's a prime example of that is like someone who was a drug addict who's gotten clean and now is the person running the clinic, right? For other drug addicts. That person has a gift. And it's incredible because another addict needs them. They can't relate to the person who's never been on the street with a needle and died twice and came back, right? That's the person they need to say, I'm here to support you. I know exactly what you're going through. And I think that's the most beautiful gift we give each other in this life where suffering is an absolute.
So what would you say to a young person listening, or it can be an older person too, but who is suffering abuse at the moment, emotional, physical?
Yeah. And it's so hard, Jason, because I'm not better than anyone. I'm not a guru, but I do know what has worked in my life. And I think what I would say, the same way I would say it to the little girl in me who from 6 to 9 years old had these experiences and then later was also sexually abused by lovers because of it, right? That you are inherently worthy regardless of that suffering, number one. You did not deserve that suffering. And that your journey to recovery, right, is going to be hard, because I'm not saying this has been easy, right? This is from the age of 6 to I'm now 45. And these lessons are an evolution. But that I would still tell them, they may not see it yet, but that they have this unique ability to help someone else who's suffering the same way they are. And that's going to be a way that they will not only empower their own lives, but be able to touch other lives as well. And that's the most beautiful gift you can do with something that you didn't deserve, that hurt you.
That's the most beautiful gift you can give, with something you didn't deserve that hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that's been the gold. Eventually, as you said in the beginning, that was the thing. I didn't know how I was going to be in service to women, but I can tell you that with my life, the second I decided to fly to India alone as a solo woman to go visit this nonprofit with zero experience helping women and girls, zero experience with Indian culture. And I was like bucket showering in a slum and supporting and mentoring young girls coming out of second generation prostitution in the largest red light districts in Kolkata. I can tell you that the second I arrived, my soul said, you're free. Sorry. Like, this is why you went through what you went through. You're here. And it was just the most beautiful. And in some ways that made it worth it. It just made it worth it. Like, I got to be in India and support young women, and just my life blew up. My heart was bigger. My life was bigger. And that's the greatest gift my suffering could give me. Is it brought me across the world and exploded my heart with so much love and so much purpose. It was just unbelievable. And I knew it when I arrived. I didn't know I was going to cry.
It's amazing how we don't always know where experiences are going to lead, are going to help us heal
Yeah.
and be of service. If I had told you at 16, hey Tiffani, you're going to
Yeah.
have a transformative experience, but like going alone to India,
Yeah.
you probably would have been like, what?
Yeah. Not to mention, I've told people to this day, India wasn't even on my radar of a place I ever wanted to visit. Like, that blows my mind, because if you talk to me now, a huge part of my identity is India as my second home. I love that country so deeply. It's the most insane, transformative place I've ever been to on the planet. And I went twice a year, 3 months a year for 8 years straight. And my soul was like, you're home. And yet, like you just said, I never thought I'd even visit India. I didn't even want to go, as the list of places to go in the world. So our lives are extraordinary if we lead, I believe, from the place where the light enters us through our suffering. I think if we do that, our life becomes bigger than you imagined possible.
I wish we had 10 hours because could just talk about layer upon layer.
Yeah.
But at the end of your TEDx talk, you towards the end you finish by talking about is it your nephew or your niece? Your nephew, eh?
Nephew, yeah.
Please tell us a little about Phoenix.
Yeah, I know there are so many layers, and Phoenix was such a gift. Phoenix was my nephew who at the age of, so he passed away at the age of 3, but I'll start with, he got diagnosed with neuroblastoma, which is a rare childhood cancer, more fatal than leukemia. It's basically like having the combination of a brain tumor and cancer in your bones. And he was diagnosed around 1.5, and he, again, right, this is a terrible suffering, right, to have a nephew and to watch my brother and his wife suffer the inexplicable pain of watching your 3-year-old child slowly depart. And he passed away in their arms at home. And thankfully, at this point when that occurred, what I can say is I had already seen, right, the overwhelming transformation in my own life of suffering becoming service and mission. So as much as I was devastated, I loved him, I loved my family, I hated seeing the suffering. There were some beautiful, incredible revelations in his life that came out so miraculously, one of which I know that Jason, is just his name itself. That's right. It's just so incredible to me that when he was wasn't born yet, and they were trying to come up with names, my brother and his wife, who are incredible people, they just couldn't figure out a name. And I've never, they have another child, and I was like, wait, they haven't named him yet? And so they said, when he's born, we'll just decide. And when he was born, Phoenix, the name just sprung to mind, and they named him Phoenix. And I as a Buddhist, can't think of anything more Buddhist than a child who, was born with this incredible suffering, but gave us all so much love, expired, and then like a phoenix rose from the ashes, because my brother and his wife, within the first month of him passing, which was incredibly difficult and painful, they started the Phoenix Stone Foundation in his name. And every week since, he's now been past 6 years, they spend it at the Children's Hospital, where he was lovingly treated by the incredible doctors and nurses there. And they service other families who are going through the same loss that they did. And that is how they have survived the pain. They will tell you that themselves. Every week when they go to that hospital to deliver care packages to other kids and parents suffering what they did, they said they have a purpose to keep going, and they feel Phoenix with them, loving that child. And when Phoenix passed in bed, I wasn't there in the room, but of course I was chanting. I was doing my Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and my mom was there laying next to him, and I said, please chant in his ear for me. And she did, and she said he had a smile on his face when he took his last breath. And his words, which have become the slogan of the foundation that my family runs, this is the words he left us that I think, again, are so inspirational. He was such a Buddhist and such a teacher, is every time we would cry, he would sense our sadness when we'd come into his room, and he's, at the hospital where he primarily lived. And yet as a 2-3-year-old, if we looked sad, he would look up at us and say, just keep happy. And that's the t-shirt, and that's the slogan of the foundation in his name. And if that's not another example of turning your greatest suffering into your greatest gift of service to others, I don't know what is. And I'm so proud of my brother for that. Like, it fills me with so much pride, because they could have shattered in a million pieces. And by the way, every day they suffer. They miss him every day. But what would be better, just to sit in that suffering, or to commune with that suffering, to become one with that suffering, right? And transform it into a gift of service to others that allows them to empower themselves and that suffering and create a ripple of change in the world. Like, they raise money for a cure every year, and they keep getting bigger and giving more money. It's incredible. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing that.
Of course.
Phoenix's energy is very palpable.
Really is.
Wow.
And he's, as you know, too, I was doing the things I was doing in India, but when he got sick and this was happening, because I now have that tool, right? I knew the alchemy of turning that suffering into a service to others. I started volunteering at the Children's Hospital, CHLA here in LA. I did that service for 5 years. I did it through his death. And I would sit down. What I was volunteering doing was sitting down and doing bedside activities with kids hooked up to their chemotherapy every week. And that transformed my suffering and loss of him. Every time I sat at a bedside, I was with Phoenix. And he gave me that gift.
Gosh.
Wow. So I won a Best Service Award at CHLA, like the year after he passed. And that transformed my suffering, it just does. Yeah.
This has been such an extraordinary conversation. I don't like to say it, but this will be the last question. But in my work, I talk about the power of doing an imperfect best, and what it means to me as I envision the best I want for the world and myself, and go for it. But when mistakes and obstacles come up, instead of using them as reasons to stop, I try to learn from that stuff and let it propel me forward. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Tiffani Brooke Fest?
I think that, Jason, you and I met because our philosophies are the same. We're using slightly different language, but I think our philosophies marry together, and it's why we were meant to talk. And that doing my imperfect best is transforming my suffering into my greatest gift to serve others. That is imperfect, right? Because I don't deserve that suffering. No one deserves that suffering. But I can imperfectly give back to the world in my own unique way by using that as a tool to help other people who've suffered the same way I have. And I think that is my imperfect gift to the world, and it makes me feel sacred in my own imperfectness.
It occurs to me, and I hadn't expected to say this, but you're not only you're not only helping people suffering in the same way you did. You're helping everyone because you're redefining or helping redefine the experience of what it means to suffer. So that's a universal thing. So thank you so much, Tiffani.
Thank you, Jason. I'm so glad we met, and I think it was mystic and aligned and meant to be.
I was second all that you just said. Thank you.
Thank you. This was so wonderful.
It really was. Thank you. Oh wow. I just cut off Tiffani saying thank you. Yeah, this is awkwardly awesome podcast. So there is always some awkwardness, even though I'm trying to up my game. But the point I want to get to is even humans are awkward. Social interaction is awkward. Imagine if Tiffani and I have been at that gathering and either one of us has said, oh, I don't talk to new people. I just talk to people I know because talking to new people is awkward. We would have missed out on this discussion. You would have missed out on this podcast. I encourage you to really think about how you can use your challenges, how you can use your awkwardness, how you can use the things you find imperfect about yourself to not only move forward in your own life, but to be of service to others and to heal and grow through all of it. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed thinking about these things. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please leave comments if you want. I love comments. We love comments. And tune in next week for a continuation of the awkwardly awesome podcast discussion with another guest. And now the outro.